Hello, boys and girls of Credit Union Land, and welcome to episode 79 of the CUInsight Experience. This episode is brought to you by our friends at PSCU. As the nation's premier payments CUSO, PSCU proudly supports the success of more than 1,500 credit unions. My name is Randy Smith. I'm one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and it is my job on the show to have conversations with the best and the brightest of the credit union community. I get to pick their brains and see if we can't find a few nuggets that we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is James Wileman. James is the president and CEO of Credit Union One all the way up there in Alaska. I've had the opportunity to get to know James better through this shared experience we all call COVID-19, and I really wanted to get him on the show. This conversation was a blast. I had so much fun with it. We talked about how James and his team have been tackling projects that may have taken them 6 months in 6 days now. It seems to be the agile world we must all live in, and how the work they've been doing to serve their members. And I found it interesting, and something that I've heard him talk about before, what he believes is here to stay even once we get through this global pandemic. The leadership section of this show was just awesome. James shared the leadership lessons he's learned along the way as he's moved up in his career, the importance of mentors and how important it is to have a good network around you, and even his advice to internal candidates who might get passed up for that CEO gig the first time through. I was glad he was willing to share his story about how he made it to the CEO position, and what you could look at as some bumps along the way. And as always, we wrap this up with the rapid fire questions to bring the whole show together. This conversation was so much fun for me to have. I think you're really going to enjoy it too. I really do look forward to the next time James and my path cross at a conference to pick up on this conversation over a cocktail. Hopefully, we'll all be moving around again soon. But until then, we do have Zoom. So without further ado, I give you my conversation with James Wileman. Enjoy. James, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
This is going to be a lot of fun, but to start with, how is everything going up in Alaska?
Oh, man. So interesting times, just like everywhere else. There's no doubt about that. In Alaska, we're doing really well. We were in some of the lowest numbers, state-wise. We hunkered down pretty early. And I think some of that was seeing the rest of the country. But, we're up here supporting each other as always, doing what we can. Things are just now starting to open back up. And we're seeing some bigger numbers. I'm hopeful that we can keep that balance going. But, also summer is here. People are getting outdoors more. So there's just some of that going on. But overall, it's going good.
That is good to hear. Over the past few months, I've heard you talk quite a bit about some of the things that you and your team have been doing at Credit Union One. A couple things that I found interesting on this from past conversations were some of the work that maybe you did pre-COVID-19 that prepared you for success during this pandemic, but then also what have you seen during this that maybe opened your eyes to some other things? Oh, yeah,
for sure. I mean, pre-COVID, we were really fortunate. I have a team of big thinkers and doers here. We take action. When the pandemic started to come on and started to reach Alaska, we pivoted, repurposed a lot of our energy towards making as smooth a transition to contactless service as possible. So we shut down our branch lobbies a couple days before it was really recommended, or a couple other credit unions did because they had some cases in their town. But we shut all ours down, going for the social distancing and the safety measure, just like everybody else. We've reopened on June 1st, started with a really careful mitigation plan. But in that time, we expanded our e-services to really let our members get the service they need and also balance their health, because people still needed access. So we did a couple of things that we iterated in just 9 days. One of them was Zoom video appointments with our members. So it was hey, you go to the website, click on the link, schedule your appointment. We had an integration with a couple of technologies to make that happen and drop Zoom appointments right onto folks' calendars for account questions, loan questions. It was really great. Super well received. We did a red light, yellow light, green light wait time thing for our drive-ups. And we've turned that off since because we're open, but that got used a lot. If this branch was busy, this other one might be not so many people in drive-up. Again, with the reiteration of the services available online, getting the employees to work remote was a huge challenge. It was for everybody, obviously, but we managed to transition about a third of our workforce within just a few weeks, which was our IT team was just amazing getting it done. And they were big choices, but the right ones for our people. We bought a lot of laptops. We bought all the headsets, finding those things and getting the procurements was a challenge for our CTO, but made it happen. I was really proud of just the decision we made to waive fees for our members on their spending accounts. Other people might call them checking accounts during half of March and all of April. It wasn't a decision we broadcasted, but it was one that did, we gave up about $750,000 in order to give our Alaskan members some money back in their pockets. And frankly, save them from having to decide should I buy groceries or overdraw my account? So, and since, of course, they have turned those fees back on, and I know other institutions did, something similar too. But when you talk about a negative net income month, for example, and you point to the fact that you gave money back to the members and you transferred that value, that's win-win, right? So, so we're really proud of that. We're going to keep the Zoom appointment thing going.
I was just going to ask you that.
Totally. Yep. Yeah. We did some member feedback on it. The other thing we did was a curbside service. So you could go online, say, I need a debit card replacement. I want to pick it up at the Abbott branch at 2:00. Show up at 2:00. We bring it out to you, verify ID, sign, off you go, right? Literal curbside pickup. So we're going to keep both of those things going. And we did some surveying on it, ways to make it better. We'll continue to offer it. Folks are continuing to use it. The way I liken it to is now, instead of having to take your lunch hour, drive 10 or 15 minutes to a branch, hope there's somebody available. Now you can schedule your appointment. You'll get with somebody to get you the help you need with your financial service, a loan, new account, questions on your account, whatever it is. And that's worked really well. It's been well received.
I've heard even outside of the credit union space, people talking about those kind of just basic doctor appointments that you used to have to try to go sit in for an hour, on your lunch hour or after work or whatever. And now to be able to schedule it, the doc just pops on and you're like, sure, prescriptions refilled, whatever it happens to be.
Yeah.
I'm wondering how much this will change. There's one other story that I really wanted to make sure to get out there, and it was a conversation we just recently had, but you did some work with the state of Alaska during this as well.
Yep.
And that seemed like another thing where talk about turning something around quickly. Could you tell our listeners about that project?
Yeah, definitely. The COVID efforts I mentioned were impactful on the personal finances, but our credit union, we don't do small business lending. So we didn't get in on PPP. We thought that would be kind of hard to spool up. I admire the credit unions that didn't have that going on. It was a lot to take on. But we did recognize, and we heard from our own members who didn't have accounts elsewhere and couldn't get in on PPP because they weren't existing, members or customers at another institution. So we began researching other options. What we ended up finding and what it became was the AK Cares grant program. The state's Department of Commerce, it's a long name, Commerce, Community, and Economic Development, right? What state name isn't? Partnered with another entity of the state called ADA. They're the Alaska Industrial Development and Export Authority. And they, with money that they got from the federal CARES relief, put together this program and then chose us to be their facilitator to operate a grant program. So it really meant we had to flex our agility and really recognize a few different elements of the operation. So for instance, we needed a niche group of our lending team to take care of the grant application processing. That meant taking folks out of branches like member services officers, for example, to make up for the consumer loan side, like the phone queue side and some of that processing. Branch managers and assistants, then they pick up the work in the lobby because the lobbies are reopening now, right? And then I'm happy to report that the setup is running smoothly in that sense. And we're hoping to provide around up to $150 million in relief to the Alaskan businesses that need it. The other cool thing about it, and something Alaska kind of different, is there's 20% of those funds set aside for what's called the rural remote access. And those are for communities that have 5,000 residents or less, which is most of the state, frankly. There's the big populations in Anchorage, of course, but it's pretty awesome and unique to our state that the state recognized, there are folks that were able to get assistance with PPP, but there's still this other group of businesses out there that might need some help. And we're in the second week of it. So it's been interesting, but it's really shown me how the credit union could make a difference, where really it wasn't in obviously anybody's business plan to go through the pandemic, but certainly then also to add this onto the plate, it was a lot, and they've stepped up to it, which is just really great to see with the staff.
I would assume that's opening up, I'll use the CUNA line, opening up eyes to other people in Alaska, maybe business owners to, your credit union that maybe weren't aware before, since they kind of have to go through you.
Yeah, no, totally. And, it's interesting because there is another tranche is what they're calling it, where they are looking for another operator to get in to get money out fast, which is great. When we got into it, it was really about how can we help? The way back to the early days of the pandemic, the governor was having calls with business leaders, and I was on a couple of those calls, and, hey, what can we do? What ideas are out there? And so for us, it was it's flat out a way to help. There will be, like you said, there will be some stickiness of those business members because, we were able to help, which is awesome. If we're able to provide them a service now or down the road that meets their needs, I'm all for it. But for us, it was really just like, one of our mottos, and I'll probably end up saying this a couple of times, is we help where others can't or won't. That's one of our driving things here at the credit union. And this was a way to do that. So
I love that. So do you think everything we've talked about, the Zoom meetings, the curbside service, do you think that this will change the way that members interact with the credit union going forward?
Oh, yeah. It already has. And so for a while, and I haven't heard this phrase in a couple of weeks, which is awesome. But then also, like, I'm recognizing maybe it's still there where people are like, oh, we got to get back to normal. Nope. Normal is done, right? We're where we are today and we're where we are moving forward. So I think it's an opportunity where we showed our passion to help Alaskans, help our members, be better, look for better ways to serve them. The state is so diverse and spread out. And so for us, it wasn't just about they can't come to our branch. For us, it's always been about how do we reach more people in Alaska? We are the only state charter credit union. We have the state as our field of membership. There's 10 credit unions that are headquartered here. There's 700,000 people. So people are like, only 10, maybe I'll go to Alaska. The water's warm. But, but it really is truly for us an opportunity to have innovated faster, make things happen faster for our members than ever before. I think it really, on one of the calls that we had recently that you and I were both on, we talked about that, where we'd say oh, a project's going to take you 6 months. And now it's no, I need it in 6 days. Yep. And, credit to my great management team, our employees, and the folks that, boots on the ground making the work happen. They made it happen, so it absolutely has to change the way we're going to do things going forward. It can't be the same.
So this kind of plays into this question, but it has been amazing the past few months to watch how quickly and how agile credit unions have been. Is there something that you think going forward that credit unions need to fundamentally change, maybe from that 30,000 foot blimp level to stay competitive, to stay relevant in this fast-paced financial services world that we all swim in, right?
Yeah. I think from my perspective, it's that now more than ever, and we've all paid lip service to this in the past, but we have to really, truly be proactive. We have to be finding the things and doing the things that need to happen. And it's tough. That's not easy. But for us, my philosophy and our philosophy here is it's far better than just letting life or business happen to you, right? So at Credit Union One, we talk about all the time, we're continuing to grow. We're going to adapt. We're going to find new ways to provide that excellent service to our members. And the opportunities are there to reach the goals, especially in this time of crisis. We've talked about that internally. You see it out in the LinkedIn sphere and other social media, avenues. And for us as a credit union, we make our own magic here. So we're always we're willing to put in the work to keep that up. And then as a whole, for the credit union movement or industry, whichever your preference is. They're both true, and we're all credit unions in it together.
Absolutely.
Doesn't really matter which one you like to use, right? But we need to keep putting our members first in the good times, the tough times. And with that mindset, our future is absolutely bright.
Yeah.
So
I agree with you. That's for sure. All right. So the last question in this section, if we were to sit down a year from now, what are you most proud of that you and the team at Credit Union One have accomplished if you had to break out that crystal ball?
Wow. I think I'll be impressed, but not surprised how we adapted and we were able to flourish despite the uncertain time. Again, something none of us have ever gone through.
Absolutely.
So I think that qualifier, like, we think it's important because we're in that time right now, right? But like just a few months ago, all of our employees learned how to do their job from home virtually overnight while maintaining teamwork, while maintaining communication. I mean, we added Slack, we added Zoom. Thankfully, we had a different video product, but we went to Zoom, which had just more robust capabilities. Our members, like, their in-person avenues of service, their habits, totally their own personal lives, right? Totally changed as well. And what's awesome is they still used us as much as they ever did. They shifted the access point. We dropped about a third in our branch transaction traffic, and it shifted to call center, which had the biggest month in April that we've ever had. We have this thing here called the PFD, where Alaskans get money every year. And that's a crazy month. Like, I'm talking about thousands of logins to online access, thousands of calls, right? And April was bigger than all of that because we had stimulus, we had Corona, we had it all. And it was just really awesome with the team that for all that shifted, we're able to overcome that and still meet their needs. And the members were able to overcome it and still use us. And for me, that's like, it's just supportive of the creative ways we work to serve people. And it speaks to what we believe in, which is just from our board of directors who are always supporting us in these, try that. Yeah, try this. Yeah, do that. I don't know if that's going to work, but they always support us, to like, the members who kept using us, to like employees who are just making it happen. We talked about on one of the calls how performance is on demand, but also like employees, they want to know what they can do to make that difference. And I'm just so grateful to our employees because they stepped up, they stayed together, they made it work with the members, they made it work with each other. We threw in this AK Cares grant, project on top of it. And you look back a year from now and say like, wow, we really were able to make something happen. Fantastic.
That's pretty cool. I think a lot of people are going to have those after this year where they look back and they're like, yeah, we did all right there. All right.
I truly hope so, because every crisis brings that opportunity.
Absolutely.
All you have to do is go find it, right? So I know a lot of credit unions did. I hope they tell those stories. I hope they share them, and give the credit where credit's due, to the staff, to the members, to everybody who persevered through it. It's really awesome.
It really is. I'd like to move on to the second part of the show, the leadership and life hacks. First question. What inspired you to take the gig as president and CEO of Credit Union One?
It's the opportunity to run a credit union for me, especially coming to this credit union, was working for a credit union that truly makes a difference. For 4 years, I ran a small credit union. It's called Alps Federal Credit Union, my hometown in Sitka, Alaska. Shout out to the Rock. And, meanwhile, Credit Union One, of course, was known in the state, second largest credit union, and doing all the things community service wise that I wanted to do, for I wanted my credit union to do. And when the chance came up to come work here 10 years ago and move to Anchorage, I took it, and I got to open a branch in an underserved part of Anchorage that hadn't had a financial institution branch in over 23 years. The citizens of that area of town, about 50% had access to a car, not owning a car, but access. So a lot of bus traffic, a lot of walking, right? So we were able to go in there. That was incredible. I like to say I moved up a few times from there and learned a lot more about the credit union. And I was essentially the COO in 2016. And I had the opportunity to be the interim president CEO for about 6 months. And then we had a job search. I was one of, the leading internal candidate. They hired somebody from the outside, which totally, that's the way this works sometimes. That person was here for about a year, a little over a year. And then I got the opportunity in January of 2018 to get the job. And it's just like, it's everything I thought it would be when I took the job, awesome team of employees, all the things we've done in the last 2 years. So it's just been, it's been an incredible journey from that standpoint.
So something I'd like to ask you on that, when Tom Kane from the Illinois League was on the podcast, he talked about, being the top internal candidate, getting passed over. They bring in somebody from the outside, but funny how the world can work. And all of a sudden, a year later, you get the job. And I had asked him the question too. A lot of people would have left then, or thought that the opportunity had passed them by, went someplace else. What made you stay, put your head down, support the credit union? And, any, I guess, tips or hacks for people maybe that find themselves in the similar position?
Well, I think, first of all, you just have to recognize, and having gone through it, it was 4 years ago, but at the time it felt like, it was one of the biggest challenges of my professional career, to be transparent and totally honest about it. You're like, you were right there, but not quite right there. Right. So, okay, well, what do I need? What is it I'm lacking? What do I need to learn? How do I need to better myself? What can I learn from this person that's coming in over me, to do the job? And I always say, when you have a boss, or you are a boss, you have an opportunity to be, I think Colin Cowherd said it, a shining example or a terrific warning, right?
Yep.
And so there's things you can learn to do, there's things you can learn not to do. And it's on you in that position to take that on. And for me, it was just, I really loved working for this credit union. I loved my peers. I loved the people that I work with and the things that we were doing. My family was pretty rooted in Anchorage. It had been 6 years. We weren't, definitely were those opportunities there? Absolutely. But at the same time, let's see how we do. Let's see how we go. Let's see what's happening. And I'm a big believer in things happen for a reason, and timing happens for a reason. So, in this case, it worked out. And the advice piece to your question, stick it out for a minute. See what's what. See what can make you better. If you decide for yourself that that's not going to work and you got to go down the road, nobody's going to fault you for that.
Right.
Yeah.
But give it a minute, maybe. Right.
Yeah. But yeah, seriously, give it a minute, see what's happening. And, it worked for me. May not work for everybody, but it did work out for me. And I'm glad
it's good advice. Yeah. It seems like it has. So before I go too much further here, I had an uncle who taught for years in Sitka, Alaska.
Oh, wow.
Mike Kimber. So,
okay. Kimber, it's a familiar name, but I don't. Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah. No, he was I think he might have been a wrestling coach or something too, but now I think he lives in Anchorage actually after he retired and all of that. So
that's cool. It's a small world.
He was in Sitka, and I think, is it Unicaliq or something? Yep. I think it was another place where he taught. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's Sitka's rural Alaska. Unicaliq would be like remote Alaska. Totally different.
He moved from Michigan, grew up in Metro Detroit, went up to the UP of Michigan, then out to I think it was Montana, then to Alaska, and just kept getting more and more remote, right? So as I said, he went, but he's still in Alaska.
That's pretty cool.
Going back to getting the job of CEO, once you got that you got that chair, how has the inspiration at all changed? Being the boss.
Yeah, it's still for all that we've accomplished. Things have shifted for us from a defensive stance of what just happened. A couple of years ago, we had this little 7.0 earthquake come out of nowhere, and I was actually sitting in this chair when it happened. I was on the phone. And it was we had a little tremor. And then the freight train came for 45 seconds. And it was, cabinets were shaking and all of that kind of stuff. And then it's from that, and even really for the first couple of years, what do we need to fix? It was almost not like a jump start, because I'd been in the role for, almost a year at that point. It happened in November. But it really showed us, once we got some of this stuff that we needed to from a defensive or reactive standpoint, to go on that playing offense mindset of what can we do next? What do we need to do? Like I said earlier, we believe in helping where other people won't or can't, other institutions. And it's just incredible to see what these employees can do, Randy. It's truly amazing, because I think my job is to get people what they need to do the work, and then get out of their way, support them, right? But I've also come to realize that these great ideas, they need to be explored and vetted. And it might be something that's really going to make a difference for us. And it's okay to fail fast if it doesn't fit. We tried the MRB banking piece, for example, here. And, the businesses weren't quite using us the way that we thought. It didn't work. It ended up being that proverbial, round peg, square peg, round hole, round peg, square hole, depending on which way you like to, say that phrase, because none of us ever get it quite right. But like once it didn't fit for us, then making that decision like, okay, this isn't going to work. We failed fast. And then take what you learned in those experiences, platform them forward to make yourself a better organization. And so now for us, the inspiration is like, what can we do next? Like we do these great things, but there are more great things that we could be finding and doing.
I'll tell you, I think that failing fast and pulling the plug on something you thought would work is probably one of the toughest things to learn. But boy, does it make a huge difference, right?
You don't want to carry the boat anchor for longer than you need to.
You have to, right?
Yeah.
You've talked about your team a lot and the amazing work that they've been doing. Is there something they've heard you say so many times they can finish your sentence?
That's interesting. I think if, and maybe this is like a self-awareness moment, right? Like nothing's coming to mind. So I could probably go ask them and they'd be like,
they'd all say it.
Yeah. But no, there's not. I don't know, not one thing out there like that, I don't think.
That's all right. So, one of the things that I noticed, I think quite a bit over the first season was people talking about that ability to sometimes the buck stops with you, that idea that, that CEO chair can be a lonely chair in between the rest of the staff and the board. The buck kind of stops with you. Have you always been good at making that tough decision? Is that a quality that you've built up in yourself over the years? Any?
So like, that fine line between arrogance and self-confidence, right? And one of those is great and one of them is not. I think the short answer is no, I haven't always been great at that. I think if we talk about just the now, like thanks COVID-19, tough decisions are coming at you rapid fire for so many leaders right now. And if you had trouble making decisions before the pandemic, you either got better or you probably got gone.
Yeah, right? You probably got run over, right?
It's been a trip. But the initial effort to be better at this for me actually came from my executives, what we call it the C-suite here. A couple of years ago, early in my start as CEO, like I've told you, I have a great team, mixed in experience, time at the credit union, time in their careers, diverse in all the ways that I'm just blessed and happy to have as a leader and that you'd want as a leader. Davina Napier is our chief lending officer. She's been with the credit union for 25 years. Rachel Langtry's chief operating officer. She's been with us for 15 years. Mark Burgess joined the team here a couple of years ago, but has, extensive experience in IT previously outside of the credit union realm, actually, which was fantastic for us because it let us look at things differently. And then Chad Bostic, our CFO, they're all still with me today. And when we started out as a team, we ended up having this really great discussion about how things, work, but often lacked like the decision, the go, no go. And really, they were able to tell me like that's what they needed, right? This is on me. Yeah. And so I had to get better at it a couple of years ago, really.
That's a good team if they can call you out on that, right?
And they, and every leader, every CEO, like, oh, I'm totally approachable. And, I like to think I am. I want to be better than I am, but I know because they're able to come to me with, stuff like this. And so what that does now is they're really great at presenting the information and the reasons for a direction or something that we need to consider. And so as the leader, like you can make the decision and I had to become more decisive. Yeah. You want the good information. And sometimes you have to make that decision with imperfect information, right? Absolutely. The known knowns and known unknowns and all that. But I'm very fortunate to have a team to work with that they can do that. We can make those decisions, and especially the decisiveness that's been needed the last couple of months. Like, hey, I think it's time to close the branches. Ooh, should we? Like, it didn't work like that. It's like, no. Yep, we need to close the branches. Or, hey, I think, we should try this. Yep, let's try it. Or, hey, what about this? Let's cut fees. Yep, like,
let's do it. Yep.
Go. Because there wasn't time.
Yeah, you didn't have that. That's for sure. We've seen that over and over. Has there been a piece of advice or a life lesson that you've found yourself going back to, over your career?
I think like true leadership as a president and CEO of an organization like ours, it's not a one person show, right? You have to kindle that fire in others. You want to encourage that ability in your team. You want to set people up for that success, like I said earlier, and make tough decisions when it's time to make the decisions. Like that's what we're here to do. And, we need to see the big air quotes here, the big picture, but you really truly do. You need to, make sure that everybody's working together so that these decisions resonate and they're impactful. So when I look back on my career, and I said it earlier about that fine line between arrogance and competence, right? I mean, time, experience, and a willingness to learn. That's the bridge from like there to where you're trying to go. And for me, and from an advice standpoint, like it's a constant process. You don't just stop it. You have to keep it. You have to keep going. You have to keep learning, whatever that's been. And so when you say like, "Ooh, what's the big takeaway or the lesson?" Right? And I've learned this early in my career. Like this work is going to get done. Our credit union's bigger than any one person. Yeah. And I think finding out early on that the work will get done and things will continue with you doing it or without you. It makes me and hopefully makes you want to give like that best effort while you have the opportunity and the privilege to be doing whatever the job that it is that you're in and doing that work. Like you have to keep that going. You can't just, it's not a turn it on, turn it off. It's, constant process.
One of the other things that I noticed in the first season of the show was mentors. So many people talked about them. Have you had mentors throughout your career? How have they, helped get you to where you are today, if you have?
Yeah, sure. We have a legacy CEO here at the credit union, Leslie Ellis, who was CEO for about 30 years. Yeah. Took it from that traditional small, 50 million to, I think it was around 800 million when she retired. And she's always been a mentor of mine. She was a mentor of mine when I was at Alps. Has been an awesome person and a really good sounding board in that sense, even before I became a CEO. So that was cool. My first CEO in credit union land, Gary Sturton, he's the CEO at Animas in Farmington, New Mexico today. He's another one. I actually turned him down to go to work for him and learn credit union land right out of college. I grew up in Sitka. I went to Juneau for college. He offered me a job and I was like, no, I'm going to move to Raleigh for a couple of years. And then luckily he gave me another shot, a couple of years down the road to come back, and that's like literally that's how I got into credit unions. Right. So he's someone I touch base with, as frequently as I can. I have a network of people from WCMS, Western Community Management School, that I went to school with, Epsilon 2007, shout out from all the way back in that day. To also, like more recently, I did the CEO Institute. Yeah. And a lot of people from those programs, people like Scott Dacus at Twin Star or Jeff Bullock at Firefly, Sam Linus at Oregonians, Shauna Shearson at Valley Strong. These are people like you go through those experiences together. You spend late nights, sometimes at a bar, sometimes while you're studying for a test. They really like almost like peer mentors and just, classmate mentors because they learn you, they can tell you about yourself. You can go to them with something and say like, hey, am I reading this wrong? They don't have all the context you have, so they'll ask the good questions. Like, I think it's really important to have true traditional mentors, but also like a network of people who will also provide that role for you, because it's a really good way to kind of self-check and self-regulate.
I couldn't agree with you more there. Before we move on to the last part of the show, I want to be respectful of your time, but if you have a free day, there's nothing on the calendar. Mm-hmm. What passions do you have outside of credit unions? What does James do to recharge?
So it's funny because we always talk about work-life balance, and I suck at it just as much as the next leader. Right. And when my wife listens to this later, if she listens, she'll be nodding her head. But I really do like to go camping, spend time with my family. We just went camping this last weekend. We're going to go not this weekend, but next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And she's also started doing she's built some garden boxes. So I'm really good at holding the board on the chop saw while she does the measuring. And
she does everything.
And, hand me this, give me that. And also just like, if I have like the perfect day, somehow I find myself in Los Angeles and I go to a Laker game and, taking one of those, which in today's times, we now realize we took for granted.
Yes. Yeah. I was going to say
the ability. So,
that live professional sports might be a little while for all of us. So.
Or even on TV. I'm happy to attend those too, but, and I'm looking forward to, even whatever the seasons become for sports. It's been really interesting how that part of our lives being kind of jostled affected other things.
For sure. It's funny you mentioned the garden boxes, as Jill and I walk multiple times a day, it seems like now, because there's not much else to do. We've noticed everybody got, in the beginning of the pandemic, it seemed like once the weather got nice in Connecticut, everybody was building garden boxes. Before that, everybody was getting puppies and Peloton bikes. So the garden boxes, you've participated. That's
the internal focus on the home and the family unit, I think, has really, like, it's been kickstarted, or your circle of friends,
Yep, absolutely. I agree with you. It'll be interesting to see how this all shakes out, years down the road from this experience. So last part of the show, the rapid fire questions. The questions are rapid. Your answers don't have to be. So what was James like in high school? And do you remember the first time you got in memorable trouble?
I was, oh boy. So first of all, I never got caught. I mean, I was always good. I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Sitka, right? That's Baranof Island in Southeast Alaska. Not the Sitka you saw in the Proposal movie, people. I need to be clear about that with Sandra Bullock. That movie was shot in Maine, although it was based in Sitka. I was actually voted most outgoing by my classmates, which was something I never thought of until I saw it in the yearbook. And I was like, well, that's pretty cool. So, shout out to the class of 92 rules, the rest rules. But I was outgoing and, like to hang out and do fun things with all of the classmates. And
we graduated the same year.
That's right.
92.
It's because we're awesome.
Right. That must be it. So you mentioned getting into the career in credit unions. Most of us stumbled into this one way or another. What did you want to be growing up?
I always thought outer space was the way to go. But math and science and other similarly related subjects that kept outer space safe from me. But I'd go tomorrow if I could. I was really happy to see SpaceX nail the recent launch.
That was so cool.
we growing up in that era of space shuttle, flights and all those sorts of things, I just thought, man, if they ever had the lottery and oh, it's you, I'd be check with the life insurance company, and then I'm probably going anyway.
Yeah, it's worth the risk. Yeah. Do you have any daily routines that you have to do, or else your day just feels off?
I don't, but I think about it, sometimes. I think when something shifts in the day that's not the norm, you notice, but when you're going through the norm, you don't really think about it too much, right?
I get that.
So, yeah.
Okay, now I'm really, since we're the same age, I'm really interested to ask you this question. Okay. What's the best album of all time? That one you can listen to without skipping a song.
What's funny about this is, the Eagles' Greatest Hits LP, right? When we were 5. Yeah. I love that album. It was their 71 to 76 hits. I asked for it for Christmas. I got 2 of them, 78 speed LP. I just thought that was awesome. But also, as I grew, I'll take any Van Halen album to a desert island. I'll take David Lee Roth or Van Hagar. The Gary Sharon years, it's dicey, but I'd probably still take it. And then also, because, I was born in New Mexico, but my parents were cowboys and cowgirls, so to speak. My mom spent time, her dad had raised horses when she was younger, and my dad had a horse in high school and would go out riding. We had horses when we lived in New Mexico, but it was before I could really ride. So country music was always a part of our sounds around the house, along with the Eagles or Molly Hatchet or, whatever. And